Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Hey listeners, Future Brendan here. If you listened to the last episode, you already know, but this is a second part of a single episode I recorded in a long walk, and I'm breaking it into two pieces. So I reused the introduction, and now we're on part two of the episode about gentler mechanisms. Enjoy. Finally, the last mechanism I want to mention that I think really works in terms of encouraging gentler play is in Scythe, the stars that you get for battle. So if you haven't played Scythe, in the game you're trying to achieve these stars, and the first person to get 6 stars ends the game. Your stars are not worth points by themselves, but at the end of the game, you earn points for the territory you control. You earn points for the it's territory, it's goals completed, I think. Stars. So it's stars you've earned, territory you control, and resources that you have, maybe. I don't remember. It's been a while. And all of that, those scores multiplied by a number based on how popular your character is. So one of the stars you can get is your popularity, or one of the tracks you can be on is your popularity, and that goes up and down. The more popular you are, the higher all of your scores are. Sort of like in Orleans, the higher you are on the scholar track, the higher your overall score is going to be. And it's really important that you get that, you boost that score up there. 2 of the stars that you can earn in Scythe, you get for battle. For winning a battle, you get a star. The thing is, that's 2 out of your 6 stars. The next time that you win a battle, you don't get anything. You might get resources, but you don't get any progress toward the end of the game. Between that and the way that the mech figures work in the game, Scythe, the designer of Scythe, Jamie Stegmaier, has created a system where battle is important and defense is really important, but offense is not really the end-all be-all of the game. You can certainly have it be a big part. If somebody is leaving their resources unguarded, winning a victory can mean taking a lot of resources. That really can be a game swing in that way. But it's not the kind of discouraging that some games will have where your entire fleet is wiped out and you are left with nothing for the rest of the game. Though I have played games of Scythe where stealing resources at the right moment can really clobber somebody in a big way. But I was saying the stars for battle, only getting 2 stars for winning battles and no more, I think is one of the ways that the game encourages a little bit gentler play, though Scythe is not a gentle game. I want to point to 3 mechanisms that I think that are in games that feel like they should be gentle, that actually end up being counterproductive to that feeling. The first, and this one is Legendary, is from the game Legendary, a Marvel deck building game. In Legendary, very significantly, it is a cooperative game that has an individual winner. What, Brendan, you say? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't make any sense. Nonetheless, in Legendary, you play some sort of Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. coordinator for superheroes, and in the battle with the villains, you are coordinating the superheroes to help with the battle. At the end of the game, everybody adds up like how much awesome stuff they did, and somebody is declared the winner. It doesn't make any sense. When we played, we just got rid of that rule. We became cooperative because it is counterproductive to the group if somebody figures out, well, I'll get more points by doing this than by defeating that villain. Even if that villain is a significant problem for the group, I'll leave somebody else to waste their energy on that. I can get more points doing this other thing. That's not good. In a co-op game, you shouldn't have people... I mean, there's one thing if it's, Dead of Winter, where semi-co-op is the way the game is supposed to be, but Marvel Legendary is not, or Legendary Marvel is not supposed to be that. So that's one counterproductive cooperative mechanism. The second one I want to mention is theme. There's a game I picked up at Goodwill a month ago. I talked about it on the podcast called Bob Ross, The Art of Chill. This is a fun little set collection game, easy to play, cute theme. Everybody likes Bob Ross. If you don't, come on, Bob Ross is awesome. But it's really not a chill game. When you play, you're racing to complete these sets, and you're like struggling with the other people, and it is a killer when somebody else takes that painting right before you got it and they get that bonus point, because it's a game of 20 points or something is the whole game. So somebody getting to 1 or 2 bonuses ahead of you, that's 10% of their score. It is not a chill game. It is a game of cutthroat racing disguised as being about Bob Ross, and as such, I think it's counterproductive. I bet there are people who got this game and then didn't like it because it was not, in fact, chill. And then finally, the game Chocolate Factory. This one, I feel like, okay, so in Chocolate Factory, there are a couple different ways that you can score points. One of the big ways is by delivering the most chocolates to a particular store. Each store you can do up to 9 deliveries to each store. And when you do those deliveries, you move your marker up along this track of 9 spots. At the end of the game, the person with the most deliveries to a store gets a certain amount of points based on that store. Each store gets a different score. The person who has the second most deliveries gets the second bonus, as long as they have at least half as much as the first player. Now, on one hand, that's good because it prevents someone from doing 1 delivery and getting half the points. Like if you've done 8 deliveries and somebody else has only done 1, it kind of stinks to have them get half the points that you got, even though you did 8 deliveries. But the game's solution to this is that in order for you to get a bonus at all, you have to have at least half as many deliveries as the next higher up person in the game. So where the first place player does 8, the second place player has to do at least 4 to get their bonus, and the third place player has to do 2. So, on one hand, this is a good idea because you allow for, on one hand, this is a good idea because it doesn't allow for someone to just squeak in and get half the points. But in my experience, it's far more likely the other way. It creates a cutthroat situation in which somebody goes and intentionally delivers a couple more chocolates to a particular store to prevent the other players from getting that bonus. So again, it shifts the gameplay motive from building your things and doing your things and being positive to doing something to screw other people out of points. And that's the only place in that game where that happens. All the rest of it is you're doing a thing for yourself, you're trying to get as many points as you can, just this one element. Kind of like the ring in Egizia, I don't want to take away your things. So I'm not a big fan of the divided bonuses in Chocolate Factory. So let's talk a little bit about positives. What could we do? What are some mechanisms, like the one I mentioned for Trickerion, that could reduce the viciousness in a competitive game, assuming that's something you wanted to do? Now, there are lots, and I hope that you'll come over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let me know a couple of them that you enjoy. Here's a couple that I was thinking about. One example would be something I'd call standing on the shoulder of giants. In Egizia Rising Sands, the first person to build some of the monuments gets a certain number of points and has to spend a certain number of resources. The next person has to spend a little bit more resources, the next person a little bit more, and so on. With the pyramid, it scales up pretty dramatically. With the obelisk, it's a little more stilted. There's levels of achievement. But in both cases, you get more points as you contribute more things, and all of that is based on what previous people have contributed. So in that way, somebody else could early on take an action that gets them a couple of the small bonuses, but that doesn't lock you out. It just means that when you go, you contribute a bigger amount and you get one of the bigger bonuses. It actually works really nice. So I like that part of Egizia Shifting Sands, what I'm calling standing on the shoulders of giants. The next one, this is one I have not seen, so I'd be interested to see it. I'm sure it exists, but some sort of rising tide lifts all boats mechanism. And it would be similar to what I was talking about before, in that as you do things, you increase the value. I'm going to say Brass does this to a degree. On one hand, Brass is a really vicious game. It is very tight. You're competing for space. You're competing for points. And often you're taking the thing that the other person was counting on to do their action. But brass also has this element where you inevitably end up helping your opponents. That when you take someone else's resource, you might be stymieing them because they were planning on using that resource. On the other hand, you help them because once you take that resource off their factory, now their factory is fulfilled and they earn points and more income. So that part works really well, the rising tide lifting all boats. The other part is, in brass, as the network gets bigger, everyone's options increase. So once I'm connected to your network, I can use your network to deliver to a port, for instance, even if I don't have the rails or the canals that go to that port. So there too, that's an element that increases the cooperativeness even as it's still competitive. But it's really hard for me to put up brass as a game, an example of a game that's less cutthroat, because brass feels very cutthroat. The way I know that is when someone takes someone else's beer or uses someone else's iron when they were planning to use it themselves and be like, welcome to brass. That's often how now you know what this game's about. So it's hard to say it's not a competitive game when that happens. But the third example I wanted to mention came to mind because of Trickerion. So in Trickerion, Trickerion, you're a magician, you're putting on magic shows, and you have these specialized helpers. You get one specialized helper at the beginning of the game. You can have a manager, an engineer, or a pretty assistant. And one of the things I like about it is all the character cards for these are double-sided, so you can pick a male or female of any of those. So the male pretty assistant is the sort of dashing young man. And each of those special helpers is able to do quite a bit of work for you. The manager and the engineer both come with bonuses involving the way your tricks work or the resources you have and so on. The pretty assistant, their bonus is they give you another assistant. The pretty assistant has their own assistant, and that assistant works for free. In other words, they're so besotted with the pretty assistant that they hang around and help them out for free. You don't have to pay them, which is a fun mechanical idea. It's sort of fun to see how that works in scoring. But it got me thinking a little bit about the French idea from Michel de Certeau, French scholar, of the peruque, the doing of work for yourself on company time, which business people have come to call wage theft, right? If you are, or time theft. If you're working at a place and you're just sitting around, time theft, especially if you have something you should be doing or could be doing. But I think there's an interesting element there where we can think about the workers in our games as people with their own motives and their own ideas. And it brought me back to this notion of like worker happiness or worker morale. I would be keen to see an economic game that encouraged you to think about worker happiness and worker morale and gave benefits in game for that thing. So, if you can cultivate a more vicious strategy or a more vicious culture in your corporation, or a lighter culture, a culture of giving or sharing or something, and in a space where the workers feel adequately compensated and well rewarded or whatever, they are more likely to stay or something, or they become happy. A mechanism where the workers have their own lives and want to do their own thing instead of just being a pawn in your game would be really interesting. I have no idea how it would work unless the game was focused on them, do something like the pursuit of happiness. I don't know how to think about that. I know there are games that focus on when workers are unhappy. I talked about that in the Invisible Workers episode earlier this year, which is on my mind because Lance emailed me about it. Thank you, Lance. But yeah. All right, so there we are, an extra long episode. I did not intend for this to be a mega episode. If I'm over 30 minutes, I may break it into two just because, and release it as a two-parter, because it fits the timeline of the episode. So thank you for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed our stroll and chit-chat about games. Pop over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let me know what you think of this episode or this last two episodes. Join me there. So, thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.